You might have seen the news over the weekend that Buffy Sainte-Marie's Juno Awards and Polaris Music Prize wins were revoked. We are talking about 2 Polaris Prize wins and 7 Junos over her career. Does this move make sense? There's a lot to unpack with this story. The group chat is here. Let's go. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Okay, so before I get to the revoking of Buffy's Junos and Polaris Music Prize wins, let me just quickly jog your memory. It's been over a year since an investigation from the CBC's The Fifth Estate raised questions about Buffy's claims to Indigenous ancestry. Buffy became famous as a Cree musician from Payapot First Nation, Saskatchewan. The investigation, though, found a birth certificate indicating she was born in Massachusetts to an Italian-American family. As you can imagine, that story kicked off a lot of discussion, including on this very show, about what do you do? What do you do with Buffy's music? What do you do with Buffy's legacy? However, the Junos and Polaris Prize, they based their rescinding of the awards on an entirely separate thing, on very simple grounds that Buffy isn't actually Canadian. She was also stripped of her Order of Canada medal earlier this year. There's a lot to unpack here. Marek Tyler is here. Kim Wheeler is here. Hello, both of you. Welcome to the show.
Hello,
Hi, nice to have both of you here. Marek, I'm going to start with you. What was your reaction when you heard the news about Buffy being stripped of the Junos and the Polaris Prize?
My reaction, it was shrapnel. And what I mean by shrapnel is, for more than 100 years, like, our identity has been systematically attacked repeatedly. More like 150 children. And those experiences have left scars that have been passed down, and they get triggered. My generation, my sisters, my brothers, we're the first generation not to go to residential school. My mom and those generations before me all walked up those steps. So it feels like every day our identity is being questioned somehow. There's shrapnel in that. And you walk into a department store. Kim, I don't know if it's like that with you, but sometimes I feel like when I walk into a store, I feel like I'm getting followed around. Somebody's questioning my identity, and or random screenings at an airport. I always feel like my identity is under attack.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, even on a status level, if you think about like Indigenous people on a status level, I'm a status Indian. I have a status card, but I use my status card at the dentist, and I just hope it gets approved. Like using a debit card, you just hope it goes through. But status card gets approved, so your identity gets questioned at every level. So, I have the honor of being status. I don't have to worry about it as much, but I think about the families that have been disenfranchised or parents who are scooped. Kim, I understand that you're a survivor of that, of the scoop, and so I think about those families whose identities are constantly being questioned when they walk into a Walmart, when they go to the dentist, when they go through security at the, wherever they're at. And so for every newly outed Indigenous person, I think there's shrapnel in the community, make like a feeling of betrayal at this level, because those scars of identity that we're still living with, they're new. And that's where it leaves me. So when I think about that piece, then I go, okay, well, let's think about systemic change, not symbolic actions. The trophies and awards that we receive for these accomplishments, in this case, an entertainer's accomplishments, those symbolize, they're symbols of success. But what is required, in my opinion, is systemic change. So yes, someone's symbol has been removed from them. But really what I'm thinking about now is to protect future generations so that they don't endure the shrapnel that we see in community, that we right now require systemic change. And that, for me, is Indigenous-led conversations, so that these organizations who have antiquated policy can make better decisions, more informed decisions, and led by Indigenous peoples to do this work. So yes, shrapnel, absolutely, but the symbolic actions need to be grounded and changed in systemic change.
Marek, I appreciate the image of shrapnel and the ways that it sort of evokes a radiating hurt. And I think like you're trying to get two different ideas, right? The idea of like the story about Buffy being a story about ancestry coming into question, and the story of what that does to identity. And ancestry and identity are related, but they are two different things. And I think the idea of Buffy's ancestry, the questioning of Buffy's ancestry, ending up introducing a whole terrain of doubt for people who are sort of trying to figure out their identity. I'm very sensitive to that. Kim, you're a Polaris Prize jury member, though you were not on the jury when Buffy's album Power in the Blood won in 2015. How are you feeling about that decision from Polaris to rescind Buffy's prize?
Well, I understand why they're doing it. That the rules are you have to be Canadian, and
yeah,
she isn't. And I don't know if she ever actually claimed to be Canadian, or if anybody ever asked if she was. If anybody ever asked to see her passport. We all just when Buffy said that she was from Piapot, those were her people. We all just took it at face value. I think it's the right thing to do, to rescind it based on her being an American citizen. I think that they've sidestepped the issue that she is being accused of being a pretendian. And I say accused because I think I'm still on the fence. I'm still confused. I mean, you have to go through the 7 stages of grief, right? And people are still dealing with that. There are people who are still angry. There are people who are still in denial. There are people who have totally come to accept it. So when we talk about, should we take the prize away based on her citizenship? Yes. I really liked what Marek said, that these are new conversations. These are conversations that we haven't had to have before, because our people have not been in the position to win these major awards. So when we have to have these conversations, and yes, they have to be Indigenous led, we're all still doing this for the first time.
I want to hold on that for a moment, because I think you two are kind of sort of trying to connect to a very complex and nuanced thread here. Because on the one hand, the Junos and Polaris stripping Buffy of the prizes under the category of the fact that she's not in fact Canadian, that is a corrective to the record, right? That is a corrective of saying this person is no longer eligible to win these prizes. She can't win Indigenous Album of the Year because she is not a Canadian person. But on the other hand, there is still, as you said, Kim, this idea that it's actually not settled. These conversations have to be Indigenous-led, but that's not to say that there is immediate consensus about what to do with someone like Buffy, who, even though there are questions about their ancestry, the way that their identity played out, or the way that they sort of I guess, lifted up Indigenous musicians over time, and accomplished things that can't just be erased, immediately. And I think I'm just kind of sensitively trying to get to the nuances you guys are both trying to draw up, because this isn't settled, Marek. So tell me about the complexity that I'm kind of seeing in your face as you kind of work through this right now.
I think Kim really settled on it's those stages of grief where are on the fence. You asked earlier, what it meant, when it happened, and I said shrapnel.
Yeah.
I also think about my mom. My mom and I used to drive in the car with the cassette in the tape, and we would sing along to Buffy. And I love my mom, but we're both not great singers. But we were great that day.
Marek, you're a great singer. That's actually not true, but okay.
To have that moment questioned, have that relationship questioned, and all of those moments with your parents in the car or in the stands or in the audience, or that moment over the headphones, to have all of those questioned, it's really challenging to work through at an emotional level. But then I also think about the organizations themselves. Kim, I understand that they're utilizing the identity of Canadian, like her not being Canadian. I think it's an off ramp. I think it's an easy off ramp. I almost to the point of, and I know that you work, and maybe it's like this is a career suicide. I don't know, but like I have a feeling like the organizations are almost disassociating themselves from the problem, and maybe that is a practice of like self-awareness. Not to they don't. It's not their place to make the decision what is indigeneity and not, what is identity and not. But maybe they don't have the people in the room to guide these conversations, these decisions, these policies. Again, yeah, we have to lead these conversations. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna take that question and actually then just put it to Kim, because there is the sort of raising the question of like, is taking the awards from Buffy enough? Like, or should these awards actually be redistributed to other artists who were eligible to take them, and like sort of park the larger conversation what to do with Buffy for a sort of second order conversation. But in the meantime, there is a vacancy, right? There's sort of like, there is a reality that Buffy winning these awards meant they didn't go to somebody else when they could have.
Yeah, I think that is a good question, because how do you go back in time, right? And give it to somebody who may have been deserving of it, who was on the, you have to ask who was on the jury during those times. How come they picked Buffy over somebody else, say like Kelly Fraser? And that's a conversation that is being had online. Like, if Buffy wasn't in that category for the Junos, would Kelly Fraser have won? And Kelly Fraser is a singer who was really starting to make a lot of noise in the music industry and starting to come up. And unfortunately, she took her life. It had nothing to do with the fact that she did not win the Juno. It was about bullying from her community. But people are asking that question.
I was gonna say, like,
and
like
I think
that she died by suicide in 2019, and she was a nominee alongside Buffy, and Buffy won that year. But it's obviously impossible to know, how those two, events are actually connected, or to speculate about that. But you're right. That's a live conversation that is kind of playing out online. But sorry to cut you off there. Continue.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. And then, for the Polaris Prize, there are over 200 jurors, and those conversations are taken very seriously. The jurors take their duty very seriously, and they have lots of conversations, and it's all volunteer. And they spend hours and hours and hours throughout the year listening to new music coming from Canadian artists. So when people say, well, she won just because she's a name, no, that's not how the Polaris Prize works. People are willing to give it to people who they've never heard of. And at the end, does it really matter who won the Juno Award? Because tell me who won the Juno Award last year.
I mean, I think you might be in the wrong room for that. I think some of us might actually know who won the Juno Award for last year. But in general, I take your point. Marek, I think something that I'm sensitive to is the thing that Kim said earlier about these being new conversations. You're not supposed to be good at having a new conversation right away. You're supposed to sort of zero in on the questions that these conversations sort of raise. Do you see some positive emerging questions that you're like, okay, that is the next question for us to ask as we try to figure out what to do with people who are claiming Indigenous ancestry when in fact they don't have that lineage at all, and they have taken up a lot of air in the room, they have taken up a lot of space in the culture, and now we have to figure out how to correct that. And that goes for individuals and community, but also for organizations like the Junos and like the Polaris Prize.
These are new conversations. I just think of opportunity. I love when a bunch of Indigenous people get together around a table from different perspectives. I love how smart we are and how creative we are and how innovative we are, because we have a worldview, a lived experience that is similar in a lot of ways. So we've all walked into the Walmart. We've all had those experiences, but we're all from different nations, from different backgrounds, from different language groups. So we have a worldview that is different. I think about, if Buffy in this case was, Nêhiyaw claiming, Cree claiming. But what happens if that it was Mi'kmaq or Anishinaabe? Do I have the space as a Nêhiyaw man to offer commentary on that, to provide direction on that. I'm not sure. These are new conversations. But then I think about, where the opportunity lies in maybe we use those decisions in 2015 and we make a case study out of them and say, okay, maybe we can go back and listen to them and see how we can make this decision better. Maybe we can put together a committee of our peoples that will be able to make this decision. I think it's very important that we, as Indigenous peoples, with our experiences, that we set the bar, that we don't live up to another matrix or rubric to qualify if we're good or not. That it's our empowerment, our responsibility, for future generations to do this work now. Because if we don't, they're going to experience this in 20 years. I don't want my nibblings, my nieces and my nephews, I do not want them to have to walk into a space that their identity is questioned. I'm done with it. And I don't want them to have to experience it again. So for me, I see nothing but opportunity, but I understand these are going to be really hard conversations. But we've got the people to do it. We're very, very smart people. It's amazing.
I'm sensitive to also the point that you raised earlier about Kim, but the idea that these are not settled conversations as much as they're certainly very live. They certainly are not settled in one specific direction. I want to say that when the Buffy story first broke, you were on CBC's Front Burner podcast, and at the time you weren't entirely convinced by that Fifth Estate reporting, and you were willing to give Buffy the benefit of the doubt. We're seeing the real consequences emerge. We're seeing these prizes be revoked, about 18 months later or so. How would you say your feelings have evolved about the whole situation?
Oh, it's really complicated, the feelings, because I know, what I want to believe. I know what is in my heart. And then I also have to, as a journalist as well, I have to listen to all sides of the story and hear what people are saying. And I want to say that the Piapot family who adopted her still consider her their aunt. They are still part of her family. And that's a part of the conversation that also needs to be included in these talks is what is Cree law, right? What is Cree adoption law? Does that make her Cree? That's not up to me to decide as an Anishinaabe Mohawk person. That's up to the Piapot family and what they've decided. And they've decided that, yes, she's still a part of their family. When we talk about the birth certificate, I think, wow, I also have 2 birth certificates. And if people were to go looking for my birth certificate, it would say that my parents were white, that my parents were Robert and Hilda Bell, that they were Scottish and English ancestry. They don't have access to my live birth form that says that my mother is an Anishinaabe and my father is Mohawk. That came from me going to the government and asking them to release that information. And it took a year for me to get that information. I think, after speaking with some very close friends over the weekend, in my heart of hearts, I think that the CBC report was correct, that she is a pretendian. Does it still hurt my feelings? Absolutely. Am I angry about it? No, I'm not angry about it. It's the point where we have to, now I'm kind of like thinking, do we separate the art from the artist now? Just like we do with people like J.K. Rowling or Michael Jackson, right? Are we capable of doing that yet?
Kim, have you listened to one of her songs since?
I have, actually.
How was that?
I have. I've also watched, I was a writer on the Buffy Sainte-Marie Starwalker show that happened out in Ottawa at the Arts Centre, where a lot of different artists performed on that show, performed her songs, and they did an amazing job. So I've watched that show again. I've watched the documentary, and I have removed a number of her songs from my playlist. And every time one comes on, my husband will say something to me.
But hang on, I want to hold on that though, because I think that is actually an important distinction. Because the thing that you just said is, I believe the CBC report. I believe that she's a pretendian. I don't know how that changes my relationship with her. I'm not ready to sort of assess what that means, or at least for you, it's an ongoing conversation. When you think about the prizes being revoked in this particular context, Does that feel like a right consequence to you? Does it feel like it's actually like, yes, the prizes should be taken away. Yes, her recognition as an Indigenous artist, that is something that we should be very clear about in terms of saying, no, that's not her place in the conversation. But the relationship that I have with her should actually be on a personal level. Is that how you're thinking about it, Kim?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I understand why they're taking her awards away. And I think for some members of the community, that's what they want to see, and that's what they need to have happen to move forward. Should we keep the conversation going online? Is, at some point, when does it become helpful? When does it become bullying? I mean, she's an old lady. She's retired. And she's not going to reap the benefit of playing live anymore. Nobody is going to go to her concerts anymore. I mean, maybe they will. I don't know. Let's see what Joseph Boyden is doing in Europe these days, right? Like,
Joseph
he's still
Boyden
out
is the
there making a
author
living.
who a few years ago, similar kind of story emerged that he claimed Indigenous ancestry, and that then came into question. That was the context there.
Yeah. So, I don't think that Buffy is ready to go out and on the road and play tour anymore.
Marek, if I can ground it for a moment in your nibblings, since you brought them up, and it's very lovely that you bring up your nieces and nephews. This is a little bit about icons, right? Like, this is what this story is about having North Stars, about having people to point to, and about the emotional consequence of what happens when you don't have North Stars to point to. Do you feel like your relationship with being able to say, these are the North Stars I'm pointing to, including Buffy, do you feel like that has shifted or that has changed for you? Or are you settled on that? Do you have a solution yet? Or are you still kind of working through it?
I think I'm working through it. I right now, I'm not going to point to Buffy as a North Star. And that it's hard to say. For years, she was. The music community is a sock drawer. It's so small. Everyone. So at one point, our colleagues, we've all had personal relationships with people who have had false claims to their identity. And it's a really challenging conversation to have when those relationships get questioned. So it's really challenging to have to re-navigate, to reorient your North Star when that person, the one that you sang along to in the car with your mom in Saskatchewan, driving to Birch Hills from Prince Albert. And that's tough. That's really tough. And it's tough for my mom. So when I think about my nibblings, my nieces and my nephews, I don't want them to be judged by someone else's learned experiences. I don't want them to be judged by or devalued for who they are. I want them to have the pride that I feel when I see them and when they walk into that room. And so I think a North Star is emerging. I think we're seeing it right now in this next generation. And actually, to be very blunt and to be very honest and candid, Kim and I are of a generation that is, maybe our perspectives are getting a bit antiquated. Maybe there's a perspective that needs to be heard. Maybe that perspective is 15 years old, and what they need and what they desire and what they want as their North Star. And I would love to hear from them. I think about when we listen to our elders, we all also listen to our youth with that same reverence, because those perspectives, are maybe lost in us or haven't come to us quite yet. And I feel like I'm in between those, and I need to hear both of those voices.
I think that is a good and lovely place to leave it. I appreciate both of your time. Thank you both for being here. Thanks again so much.
Miigwech.
Thanks, y'all. Marek Tyler is a musician of Nêhiyaw and Scottish descent from Treaty 6 territory who performs as Asko. He's also an uncle. Kim Wheeler is an Anishinaabe and Mohawk writer and producer and host of The Kim Wheeler Show on SiriusXM and a 60s Scoop survivor. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. Listen, we'll be back tomorrow. If you're around, if you don't have any plans, we would love to see you then.